It's okay if we start. Before we pray, I want us to open the Bible to the book of Acts. Chapter 7. Verses 58. Are we there? Acts 7 verses 58. If you're there, you can read loud and clearly.
And cast him out of the city, and stoned him, and the witnesses laid down their clothes. And cast him out of the city, and stoned him, and the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet, whose name was Saul.
Amen. Amen. In Jesus' name. Amen. Lord, we thank you so much for your love and your grace upon our lives. Thank you for bringing us all here together, oh God. Thank you for the opportunity to give your word today, oh God. And I pray that your word will go forth and touch souls today in Jesus' name. Amen. Pray that there will be a transformation today in Jesus' name. Begin to do the work in the hearts of people today in Jesus' name. For in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Shake someone's hand as you go to your seat and tell them they look beautiful, they look handsome, they look amazing.
You look beautiful. You look handsome, sir. You look beautiful, gorgeous. Beautiful. You look handsome. You look beautiful.
You can have a seat in the presence of God. Amen.
You look handsome, and you look beautiful. You look handsome. God bless you.
Thank you, Amen. Amen.
You look handsome. You look glamorous. You look handsome.
The story we just read in Acts 7. Are we all together? The story we read in Acts 7 was the stoning of Stephen. And they have finished, Stephen has finished telling them literally the beginning to now about why Jesus came. And so Stephen is saying this, and they're about to stone him. And they stoned Stephen, but the people who were stoning Stephen, they called the witnesses, they laid their jacket and their coats at a young man's feet, and his name was Saul. If I could read chapter 8 verse 3, so this is the end of 7, but if I could just skip a chapter and read chapter 8 and verses 3, what I will see is, but Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. He dragged up both men and women and put them in prison. In my house, I'm like the thief, if that's a good word to use. In church, I take everybody's clothes and shoes and food, and you know that person in the house, that's me. So my brother would have so a nice jacket that I like, and when he's out of the house, I would that's your jacket, and then go to where I'm going, and he'll come home and he'll see me with the jacket, and then he'll be so like, David, what are you doing with my jacket? And later on, as we grow older, I began to have some nice jackets. And then my little brother, John, I would see him with my shoes. And I'll go to my mom and I'm like, Mom, do you see John with my shoes? Why does he have my shoes on? And she said, actually the one that taught him. and that was my first example of the first understanding of an example. See, my mom didn't tell him to go and take his shoes. He watched me take his brother's shoes. And then he began to take my shoes. Example isn't always explained, sometimes it's watched. Like, I don't have to tell you to follow this person, sometimes all you have to do is just watch the person. And you begin to follow and fall into the footsteps of the person you are watching. First question to you today is, are you an example? Because Saul, who became Paul, was someone who they laid the jacket at the feet of. He wasn't stoning Stephen, he watched. In a chapter later, he begins to cause havoc on the church. Like, I watched everyone who I followed, I watched them do the bad thing, and then I began to do a chapter later. Are you understanding the pattern? I just watched first. I wasn't the person at the beginning, but the chapter later, I began to do. Question for yourself, are you an example? In what area are you an example? Some people are examples in church, and we could be a good example in church, but be a terrible example at home. We could be an amazing example at home, but be a terrible example at work. Be a good example in work, but be a terrible example in college. Are you an example? The way I see it is, that's the question I want us to ask all the way through. Am I an example? Am I an example? And every single day of your life, you need to ask yourself that question, am I being an example? But I don't want to speak on a very normal basis and say, be an example when you haven't seen a good example. So I may ask another question and ask, who is your example? Now, some people have examples, maybe their parents are the examples, maybe their friends are the examples, and you saw maybe your dad go to church and, dance and do everything good in church, but go home and have a serious temper. Are you understanding what I'm saying? You may have seen him be kind in one area, but be evil in another area, and you grew up watching that example, and that became something that became natural to you. You began to watch an example of something bad, and then it became something that was natural to you. You began to just do this, and you didn't even clock yourself doing it. Are you understanding what I'm saying? You didn't even, no one points at the dad and says, I want to do what he's doing. I just find myself doing what he's doing. Understand how examples work. It doesn't work like you just say today, I'm going to follow an example. You end up just stepping into the example. So who is your example? Yes, people have some great examples and some, successful people are the examples, but can I tell you this, that you don't have to be successful to be an example. Because as much as there's good examples, there is bad examples. Yeah. And as much as there's bad examples, you have to understand that people can have some good examples in them and some bad examples in them. Every good person has bad in them, and every bad person has good in them. So what example are you taking? What example are you learning from? What example are you following? And so we see Saul at one stage watching, and at the next stage, he's doing. Saul now is on his way to a place called Damascus. Everyone knows that story, right? And he's on his way to Damascus, and he's going towards Damascus. And shall I tell you something about examples, is that the person you taught may end up being better than you. you see, I stole from let's call it borrowing without remembering to give you back. Can you call it that? I took from my brother, and he catch me, but my younger brother is better than me at doing what I used to do. Saul was watching people stoning Stephen, but then he began to cause havoc on the church. They just caused havoc on one man. Saul followed an example and became better at persecuting the church. Who is your example or who are you showing an example because they could be worse or better? Okay. Saul is going to Damascus. He's going to Damascus. He's about to do, ministry for killing. He's just gonna tear up the whole Christian kingdom. And on his way, we know the story. Jesus appears to him and he says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And a reasonable response, I would believe, is that Saul would say, because it's what I saw growing up. The Bible says he was a young man. So what I saw is what I'm now doing. It's a reasonable response. What I saw was what I'm now doing. And so Saul is on his way to kill the Christians, and Jesus appears to him, and then there's an encounter. Elbow your neighbor and say an encounter. An encounter. You see, encounter does more than explanation. I've been in church all my life. They've explained the Bible from A to Z to me, but that didn't make me believe in Jesus. Are you understanding me? Yes. They explain the Bible from A to Z, tell me don't do this, don't do that, but that's not going to change me. An encounter changes. Are you understanding? An encounter changes what an explanation cannot change. You can explain the Bible. Stephen explained the Bible to the witnesses and they still stoned him. An encounter is the only thing that can change Saul. No explanation. So when we're telling people, come and be an example, look at this person, be an example like him, be an example like him. It's a good idea, but I haven't seen them in their work. No one had to tell my little brother to do what he was doing. He had to see me do what I was doing. An encounter, an experience with Jesus is the only thing that will change you and make you an example. So Saul has this encounter with Jesus on the way to Damascus. He's going. And we see later on, I'm just going to skip a big bit. We see later on that Paul, his name now changes to Paul, and he now writes 2/3 of the New Testament. Someone who was going out to kill Christians has now become a stone, a rock for the whole Christian nation. He now brings the gospel to Europe. He brings the gospel, he spreads the gospel so wide. But someone who was on the way, following a bad example, now had an encounter, and his encounter became his example. If you're looking for a topic for today, say my encounter is my example.
My encounter is my example.
Because I have seen and read. Can I put it this way? Some people may never read the Bible, but you may be the only Bible they read. Like they may never come to church, but if you live a life like Christ, they're watching you. Are you understanding it? You have to have an encounter. You can't just know about God. It's not enough to just know about God. He says, don't only be hearers, but be doers. It's not something that I just listen to and I know. I can ask everybody here, is it bad to steal? They say yes. Is it bad to lie? They say yes. But do we still do it? Am I speaking to somebody? I can know a lot of things, but I may not be doing the right thing. So I have to have an encounter with Christ, and so that becomes my example. That's how I now begin to live my life. That's how I now begin to walk. Saul had an encounter, and now his name changed to Paul, the right teachers of the New Testament, and he's now a rock in the Christian nation. My encounter is my example. But before that, we have to understand that we may need to lose some examples. Say lose some examples.
Lose some examples.
If you're going to the gym, if you want to, lose some weight, if you want to be healthy, you would have to put some things down. No regular trips to McDonald's every day, no regular trips to KFC. You may have to drop some things. And see, when we have an encounter with Christ, there may be some things that we may still be holding on to. For example, an anger issue that you saw from your parents, an anger issue, a serious anger issue. And I saw a serious anger issue, and I began to have a serious anger issue, and it was something that I began to manifest in very heavily, and I had no control over my anger. So when I had an encounter with Christ, I thought that I may have thought that it's good, okay, I love Jesus now, Jesus is my king and Jesus is good, but this is part of my blood. Like this is so deep inside of me. I don't think, everyone in my family has anger, so this is something that, it's a part of me. Are you understanding? But he says, if any man be in Christ, all things, behold, all things have become new. So all things are passed away, behold, all things have become new. Not everything apart from your anger issue. Not everything apart from your lust. He says all things have become new. So we need to start to begin to say, what are the things that I haven't let go when I gave my life to Christ? What are the things I haven't let go when I had an encounter with Christ? Or what are the things I'm still holding on to? You need to begin to lose some examples. Yes, you may have seen someone do well in one area, but be terrible in another area. You need to be able to lose some examples. See, Abraham was a great man, father of all nations, but he lied that Sarah was his sister. David was a man after God's own heart, but he killed to have Bathsheba as his wife. Moses was a leader that led the people out of Israel, but he killed a man. His anger was his issue. See, they are great role models, but we can't follow the whole life. As in my mom is a great role model, but I can't follow her whole life. Connor said something great last week. He goes, if you try and copy somebody, you end up in a second class. I can't be like my mom. As great as she is, I cannot be like her. I can take some great examples of her, like prayer. That's why I now become a man of prayer. Like reading the word, I can now become a man that reads the word. But if I take everybody, because everyone is flawed, I cannot take every single part of them. Are you understanding what I'm saying? And then a man called Jesus, a person Saul. And so Saul has to now leave everything behind. The reason he could follow Jesus as an example was because Jesus was perfect. A man without flaw. So he follows Jesus, a man who was perfect. And so when someone offends him at work, he remembers that Jesus said, if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other. When someone steps on my toes, if Jesus is my example, I remember that I should forgive 70 times, 7 times a day. When people offend me again, very deep where I did not deserve it, I remember that Jesus said, forgive them for they know not what they do. Are you understanding what I'm saying? It's, Jesus becomes my example, so I now follow in the footsteps of Jesus. Because he was perfect in all ways. Because David is a great leader in the Bible, he's a man after God's own heart, and I can follow his example when it comes to praising, but maybe not with the lust issue. I can follow Solomon's example, he's a wise man, but maybe not with the lust issue. Are you understanding what I'm saying? But Jesus is perfect in all ways. So why don't I follow the perfect example? Can I tell you the last point? Can you choose your example? And that's Jesus. I mean, I've given you so many different examples. Your dad may have a great aspect to him. Your mom may have a great aspect to her. Your best friend, the most successful person, may have a great aspect to them, but they're not perfect people, they're human beings. And I cannot follow the whole life, I must follow the one who is perfect, which is Jesus. In that way, the Bible says, be perfect, for I am perfect. You can only do that with an encounter and with a relationship. I cannot tell you to follow Jesus. You must have an encounter and understand and experience who he is before you follow him. I can't follow someone I don't know. I cannot have a relationship with someone I don't know. I cannot hear from someone I don't know. I must have an encounter with Jesus before I begin to follow in his footsteps. Can you choose your example today? I was a person in school, when I was in secondary school, some Muslims and like non-believers and stuff would say to David, like, David, you go to church, but you're worse than us. You know what I'm talking about. Like, you go to church, you're the son of a pastor, but you're worse than us. It shows that going to church doesn't make you a good example, but people are always watching you. Going to church doesn't mean you have a relationship with Jesus. Going to church doesn't mean that you're going to heaven. I'm so sorry. Being the son of a pastor doesn't mean you're going to heaven. An encounter, a real relationship, a real walk with Jesus is the only thing that can guarantee this. And so I got to college and I changed a little bit, but not, wholly. And be in conversations that maybe I shouldn't be in, be in places maybe I shouldn't be in. But the day I had an encounter, and a true encounter with Jesus, what happened now, skipping the story, is that I began to start a ministry in a college. And the first week we had 25 people come in. But I still developed my relationship with Jesus, and the next week we had 50 people come in. The week after we had 100 people come in. The week after we had 200 people come in. And what we began to see is hundreds of people following an example. Paul said now in 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, he said, follow my example as I follow Christ. You see, as I said, people may never come to Christ or look at the church or come and read the Bible, but they're watching you. If Christ is your example and people are watching you, you're going to lead them to your example. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So Christ is my example in all aspects of my life. Christ has to be my example. Even when I'm feeling low, Christ has to be my example. When I'm feeling high, Christ has to be my example. When I'm feeling weary, Christ has to be my example. In all aspects of my life, can Christ be your example? Because don't forget, people are watching you. My first question to you was, are you an example? No one is looking at you like, hey, I'm looking at you to see what you're going to do. But some people may think that a bad thing is okay if they see you do it. Have you ever thought something was right, but realized that it was bad because you saw an example do it? Are you an example in all areas of the life? Amen. Amen. Be perfect as I am perfect. And so, I wanted to take this second to meditate. If you could close our eyes and bow our heads. I don't want you to bypass this message and think you're perfect. He who thinks he stands should be careful lest he falls. But I want you to think about who may have been your example growing up. Yeah, they may have been a good person, but they may have had some bad in them. What you now have to do is begin to ask for an encounter with Christ. It doesn't matter how bad you were. Can I explain that to you? It doesn't matter how bad your past is, how bad your current is. It doesn't matter how bad you have been. It doesn't matter, because Saul was someone who was out here killing Christians. It doesn't matter how bad you were. God can still show himself to you. You can still have an encounter with Christ. It doesn't matter how far you've gone away from him. Saul was killing Christians. But you can still have an encounter with him. doesn't matter how bad your example was, you can still have an encounter with him. You can still have an encounter with Christ today. And remember, we need to begin to lose some examples. There's certain things that we will still hold on to, but we need to begin to lose it. I know we're going to make up our mind that today, Christ, it's you that I'm choosing. You're my example that I'm choosing. Because you're perfect in all your ways. I choose you today, Christ. In Jesus' precious name. In Jesus' name. Lord, I thank you so much for today. Thank you so much for your word that you brought forth today. Lord, in any way we have begun to move according to what our example showed us, whether it be bad or things that are not pleased with, that you're not pleased with, oh God. We ask, oh God, today that we would have a fresh encounter with you today in Jesus' name. Lord, we decide to leave those bad examples behind in Jesus' name. And today we decide to choose you as our example in Jesus' name. Thank you so much for everything you have done and for everything you will do. For in Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. Amen. Give God a round of applause.
I believe we can do better. Wonderful. Like I said, it's glorious. Our youth have taken over already.